Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha, and I like to discuss US history and everything in between. Today, I want to discuss the differences between um, a non official cover spy, right, or agent. They're also called deep cover, or um, and a sleeper agent, right? A sleeper agent. So I want to discuss the differences. By the way, this information is in the public domain. I'm not a spy for any government. I don't work for the CIA, but this information is not classified. It's in the public domain. But of course, I'm a historian and I have a degree in U.S. history as well. And so I like to discuss these matters because they're interesting to America. By the way, something that's in the news for anybody who checks up on things like that. The son of a prominent Texas Republican chairman, Tom Pauken. Tom Pauken is the name of the father. His son is Thomas Weir Pauken II. Has pled guilty uh, to working as an illegal agent for a foreign government, and that's China. So that's Thomas Weir Pauken II. And I think this is in the Eastern District of Virginia, right? U.S. District Court, Eastern District of Virginia. Incidentally, today is June the 5th, 2026. Today is also the day the former senior CIA official, member of the Senior Executive Service, David Rush, is being arraigned for charges of um, theft of government property. That's violation of 18 USC section 641 and falsification of government records, or making false statements to the government in government records. That's eight violation of 18 USC section 1001. David Rush, of course, is the person who fabricated his entire credentials and became one of the leaders, right, senior leaders um, of the CIA, right, as a member of the Senior Executive Service. He did this for almost 2 decades. But and interestingly, he had carted off some $40 million worth of gold bars, 303 gold bars to be precise, with luxury watches, 35 almost 35 Rolexes, right, found in his home, and $2 million in cash. But again, in that same court where he's being arraigned, um, the son of former Texas chairman of the Republican Party in Texas, that's Tom Pauken. He's a former attorney as well. He's a lawyer, author. He was a Vietnam veteran, right? Tom Pauken. His son, Thomas Weir Pauken II, has pled guilty to working to spying, right? So when they say you're an illegal agent for a foreign government, you're a spy. Again, remember, espionage is illegal, right? Espionage is illegal, right? So even though we have intelligence agencies and things like that, espionage is actually illegal because the things they do, they set up, for instance, their rivals are foreign governments, right? In the world of espionage, they spy on behalf of one country for against another country. So they're trying to get sensitive information, or they're trying to spread propaganda in that nation, disinformation, sow disaffection, or engage in economic sabotage, right? So they're doing something that's inimical, right, to the interest of that nation. So spying, espionage is illegal, right? Espionage is illegal. So today, as I said, I'm going to be discussing the differences between non-official cover, also called deep cover, and a sleeper agent. Um, but let me just get some more details, provide some more details regarding this guy, Thomas Weir Pauken. the second. So he had been living in China for since about 2010, for over a decade, but working as a journalist, right? He was working as a journalist. Then he was approached apparently by a handler. They call them handlers, who worked. It was this person was a female named Kathy, right? That's, I guess they're using a nickname, Kathy, on behalf of the PRC. That's, China, the Chinese government, PRC, People's Republic of China, right? So they, and basically representing their intelligence outfit. That's Ministry of State Security. And so this guy, Thomas Weir Pauken, he had been working as a journalist, right? He worked as a journalist for Central China Television. Of course, he's an American. He was born in America. His father, a prominent Texas politician and lawyer. Uh, and that's the son, Thomas Weir Pauken II, all working for uh, China Central Television and Xinhua News. However, he was not approached by a handler, right, Kathy, to travel to the U.S. where he's from. That's where he's from, and influence politicians, influence people with access to politicians, and obtain obtain information, right? Obtain information. So, and he had been paid apparently over $100,000, right, to do this. So, um, over $100,000, was what he'd allegedly been paid. But he's pled guilty. His sentencing is September the 1st, right? He's waiting sentencing on September the 1st. And his sentence could carry as much as 10 years imprisonment. Um, and I guess the reason why he pled guilty was to avoid a trial, right? So he could have a lighter sentence. Because spying, in America, you can actually get the death penalty, or you could go get, life imprisonment, yeah, if the U.S. government goes all out again. So, just taking a plea deal is, if they go ahead and plead guilty, it just makes it, they get a lighter sentence. Um, so that's basically what he was doing. So in his case, he's an asset. He's an acquired asset. He starts spying for foreign governments, in this case, China. Uh, um, Not necessarily. I don't know the details, so let me not compare him. But what I was going to say is he's sort of not a sleeper agent. So his role was to go out and acquire assets. Assets are agents, people that he would be paying, or people who he would cultivate a relationship with, and he'll be, uh, you know, um, getting the sensitive information, or doing, the bidding of the state security service, or the foreign government that he's representing. So now, back to what I want to discuss today. I want to discuss a non-official cover, or deep cover, right? Someone who had been working as a non-official cover. I did a video discussing her. Um, is the former um, who just resigned. She resigned as former deputy director of national intelligence. That's Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, the daughter-in-law of Robert Kennedy Jr. That's the current Secretary of Health and Human Services. So prior to that role, when she was young, Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, she'd studied in England, right? She studied in England. Her mother was actually British, even though she was American. She was born in America, but her mother was British. She got her bachelor's in Oxford University, master's from Georgetown. And when she graduated at the age of 22, making her one of the youngest females to be recruited by the CIA, she became a NOC, right? Non-official cover. So she started working for the CIA, and but she was living in Asia, in Shanghai. Her her day job apparently was as an art dealer, right? So she had non-official cover, right? And her job, even though she was posing to everybody, she had a fake identity, used a fake name, right? Not using her real name. And then she's posing as an art dealer, and that's what she was doing. She did this for a long time. But what she's really doing is she's gathering assets, gathering information, and she has this in her book. She talks about this in her book, Life Undercover. The coming of age, coming of age of a CIA agent or something like that. Life Undercover, but that's her book, and so her job though, as she's doing undercover, is to acquire agents, they call them assets, to acquire assets, people who will be spying on her behalf, on behalf of whatever government she's represented. In this case, the CIA, the US government, to get information, do different sorts of stuff, right? Espionage work. Again, espionage is legal. Now, if she had been caught, right, the Chinese government or wherever foreign government where she's living in, they don't know she's a spy. They don't know she even works for the federal government, US government, right? They don't know that. That's why they are non-official cover. So they are, they're posing like they're civilians, right? Have any official, they don't have any official involvement or relationship with the U.S. government, other than hey, they're American citizens, they carry an American passport, but they're not. Uh, they don't present themselves as working for the U.S. government, right? So that's a non-official cover, or whatever country it is. If it's British, if it's the Soviets, whatever country. Sorry, they're no longer the Soviets. Well, I'm gonna um, discussing generally what the world of espionage. I'm gonna use Soviets, as when it existed back then, because the USSR were actually number one in this, using sleeper agents, right? Which I'm gonna discuss next. Um, so non-official cover, they are not operating in a U.S. embassy, in an embassy. They're posing as civilians, right? Civilians that they don't work for any government, right? And they have a regular job. In this person, like case of Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, for instance, who was a knock as well. That's non-official cover knock, deep cover. She is posing as an art dealer, but really what she's doing is, well, she's working every day. She has a day-to-day activity undercover, right, in which she's trying to gather assets. She's trying to recruit people, right? She's trying to recruit people to be spies, or she's actually doing something. She's doing spy work herself. She's infiltrating something. She's doing something, right? Gathering information. She's doing something, right? But her apparent job is not related to the government, to any government, to the U.S. government. She just seems like a private civilian individual. If she's caught, right, she's going to be prosecuted. The U.S. government will deny her. They will say they don't have any involvement with her. They don't know her, right? They'll deny her. So because they have the relationship with the government is plausible deniability in those cases, right? Because they're not a government uh, official. So they're called an illegal agent. They're illegals. They're called an illegal agent. But on the other hand, if they were there are people, for instance, who work for um, the CIA or an foreign intelligence. Let's take, for example, the CIA. If they're really spies, they work for the CIA, they might have an apparent job as working for the State Department, and then they might be positioned, you know, in in the in an embassy, U.S. embassy in a foreign government. It might be U.S. embassy in China, right? So they might just be like some kind of attache. Maybe they are a director of something, an analyst, in the embassy, American embassy in China or something. But they work for the U.S. government, right? It's so they have an official cover, so they have diplomatic immunity. Everybody who works in the in a in an embassy U.S. embassy in a foreign government, they have diplomatic immunity. So if they're caught if they're caught spying, right, doing their actual real job, right, if they're caught, then the U.S. government, even though they're arrested, they have a diplomatic immunity. The U.S. government will take them over and they'll be kicked out of that nation, but they can't be prosecuted because they have diplomatic immunity. The U.S. government, they'll negotiate with that foreign government, and they'll just apologize that, hey, okay, we're sorry, hey, you caught us, whatever. So and that's it, right? So they have official cover, right? They're affiliated with the government. They have official cover as opposed to a knock, someone who with non-official cover. On the other hand, there are sleeper agents, right? A sleeper agent is also an illegal. So the um, spies with that are knocks that have non-official cover, right? Like Amaryllis Fox Kennedy used to be when she was a CIA officer, right? She was a knock. And those who are sleeper agents, and I'll give examples of sleeper agents. They're both under the category of illegals, right? Because if they're ever caught, right, if they're ever caught in their host nation, right, where they're operating, right. For instance, it can be in India, they could be in Russia, they could be in China. If they're ever caught, the the government they are representing will deny them. So there's plausible deniability. For instance, the U.S. government, if they're really spying on behalf of the U.S. government, the U.S. government will deny them. They're not going to do. They're going to say, hey, we don't know anything. No, this is not our person. You know, and they'll be criminally prosecuted. They'll just be locked up in jail. Right. Sometimes they can even be executed. Right. Depends on the host nation's laws against spying. Again, espionage generally is illegal. Right, so that's Knox, deep covers, or they're also called non-official cover agents, and sleeper agents. They are both under the category of illegals, right? They're illegals. Now, an example, a famous sleeper agent was a guy called Jack Barsky, right? Jack Barsky. 60 Minutes, different media outlets, he carried his story, right? He became famous because he'd assumed an identity in America. He came in originally as a foreign student. Then eventually he settled down, he married, had children, right, with an American and all that stuff. I think it was the black American woman. And he was actually East German, right, during the time of the USSR, when the USSR was still active. And he came as a foreign student, but he came under a false identity. So he'd been trained um, during the time of the USSR, in the Soviet bloc. He was trained specifically for this purpose, and they they'll train you, right, to assume a false identity. The papers. So one of the things that they do, and the reason why I'm using Jack Barsky, and somebody else I'll talk about, there's Conan Molidoy, who assumed the name of Gordon Lonsdale. There's William Fisher. He was born William Fisher, and he also had another name of Rudolf Hess, right? He was of the KGB. Um, so the Russians are the masters in sleeper agents, using sleeper agents. So a sleeper agent is someone that's cultivated to be a spy in a foreign land, right? For they assume a false identity, right? Somebody else's identity. They assimilate with the civilian population. They're not doing any work, right? So they're just harvesting them. They're not doing any work. They're inactive. They're dormant. Not doing any work, functioning as spies. So they're left in this inactive state. It can be over a decade, for a long time, a decade, 20 years, until they are activated to do something specific. It can be to assassinate someone. It can be uh, to alert, activate a network that of spies that already exist to do something. It could be some kind of like sabotage, something specific, or to get information, or to help somebody, another other spies that are there, right? So they are sleeper agents. Russia is an expert in this and had many sleeper agents in America for a very long time. In fact, there was a scandal at one time. There was a ring of agents. It's with Russia in America, right? And it's gone on for many, over long, lengthy periods of time, right? Recurrent periods that a ring of sleeper agents will just be uncovered, and they'll have an exchange with the U.S., and whatnot, and America will kick them out. Notably, there was at the time of, was it Anna Chapman? Anna Chapman, I think her real name was um, her real Russian name. Anyway, I can't remember. I can't pronounce it. Ketchenko. I can't pronounce it. But anyway, she goes by Anna Chapman, right? And so she had a British identity. She was British and she was Russian, and she was here in America posing as a business person. And eventually she was arrested, deported, with a ring, right, that existed of sleeper agents. So a sleeper agent, um, one of the ways that they do it, again, I'll use the example of Russia, because Russia is the leading nation in creating this. They will cultivate someone's identity, and they use someone in their target nation. The target nation, say America is the target nation. They'll get somebody's identity that's simply, that they can, that's like a real person, right? If they want to use America, for instance, they'll get somebody's real papers. They have a real social security. They were really born in America. We had a real profile, like the case of Conan Molody, right? Conan Molody, right? Conan Molody. He assumed the identity of a guy called Gordon Lonsdale, and he was born in America, his papers, but he went to Finland. And of course, Finland was within the Soviet bloc, so the USSR, the KGB got their records. So that was how they were able to get his real legitimate records and all that. And but the guy died. He died. That's the real person called Gordon Lonsdale, right? He died. He had no affinity with the KGB or anything, but because they're able to farm records, right? Real people's identity, their papers, and all that, their social. Because America needs all of those, uses all of these things, social, and like they have to be born and all that stuff, right? Real persons. But he was dead, so they had this guy called Conan Mulder, close in age to this Gordon Lonsdale who was dead, and they train him. They have you somewhere. They started training him since he was a kid. They train him. They have him assume, he speaks like an American, cultivate you. And that's the thing about spies. You notice many of them speak many different languages, like William Fisher, who was Rudolf Hess, spoke five languages fluently, English, and very fluid, right? They don't sound like a foreigner because they assume the identity of whatever host nation they're in. So they can blend in, right? It could be, he spoke, that's William Fisher, he spoke um, English, German, Russian, Yiddish, I think French, all of these things very fluently, right? And they train them for a long time to assume this identity, and somehow they get them into the host nation. They get into the host nation, and then they start living, right, like regular folks, right? And they get a job. It can be working, somewhere, you know in construction, regular, like if a sleeper agent from Russia were in America, they'd be a regular person. They could work in business, work at a gallery, work at a museum, work as a teacher, right? Work, even become a professor. They could work in a bank. They could work in different places, and they're just rising. Regular people. They're not reporting to their handler. They don't have a handler they're reporting to. They're not doing any activities, any job. Their role is to live like a citizen of that host nation where they're in, right? Until they're activated. So they have something that activates them, and then they now start communicating to do that specific thing. Sometimes it can be to assassinate someone, right? So they're now activated to do something specific. Um, so again, sleeper agents again as well. They're illegals, right? They're illegals just like a Noxer. But the sleeper agents, right? They're in a waiting game. They're just waiting, and and living like regular people. And again, Russia is an expert in this. Now, I'll give an example of someone, of a couple of people who were sleeper agents. Like there was Jack Barsky, like I said, he was from East Germany, came as a student, and then he actually got a job in America, and as a contractor started getting close to I think he started working for one of the agencies, like one of the leading US government agencies, maybe the intelligence agency, as a contractor. And his assumed name was Jack Barsky, right? But it was after the Soviet Union collapsed, and he was never activated, but somehow when the Soviet Union collapsed, right, he could have returned back to Russia or whatever. And he went and turned himself in to the FBI that, okay, this is who he really was. And people, they consult with him now. So if you Google Jack Barsky, you see he's a consultant. He's written a book about it. And so I'll do a subsequent video and, just explain further with the lives of certain people who were actual sleeper agents. My name is Olorotimi Osha, and I will keep you posted. Thank you.